reopening then today for those 3 grades. Noncedo Madubedube is the General Secretary of Equal Education, and she joins us now via Skype. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon, Flo, and thank you so much for having us.
As a start, could you share your thoughts on the reopening of schools today, particularly on the issue which has become quite contentious of grade R's being allowed back? Were you satisfied with the minister's response as to why? She was speaking earlier on SABC News with my colleague Leanne Manus, and she mentioned the fact that it is an important phase in the education system, but also a care facility for parents, who will have to be going back to work. Are you satisfied with that sort of response? And really just give us your overview on the returning of learners to school today.
Yeah, so the one thing that we've been emphasizing is equal education, that it's important to base the reopening plans on the reality of the experience of the school community by people that are in those positions. So learners, the SGBs, the school management teams, teachers and parents. And if you aren't able to be empathetic and take into sort of regard strongly the anxieties and the caution and the emotions that parents are feeling by allowing learners or their children to go back into school during this period, then it's a bit of a careless undertaking. So whilst I hear the minister's sort of call for learners to go back to schools, because these are our priority grades for them. And what's been clear from the past few months is that the Department of Education isn't able to, and provincially in fact, adequately cater for learners to learn while they're at home. A lot of our members have said to us, look, learning from home, the kinds of challenges you experience are around competing responsibilities between housework and homework. Many learners have spoken to us about lack of access to things like data, resources, and the need for peer mediation, peer and teacher mediation. So they felt that blended learning programs like radio and TV haven't allowed for an interactive basis of learning. So the reasons that Equal Education thinks it's important for learners to go back to school, but gradually and fitting the context of the different sort of areas and communities we live in, is because learners have themselves said they would prefer to be back at school during this period. The one thing that we are relieved about, though, is that the expectancy of learners to go back has gone down from what was previously announced as 52% by the Basic Minister of Education to now a 20% occupancy inside all schools. And we think this is a better resolve than having allowed all of those grades to transition back, especially while the virus seems to be on an upward trend. I know that you're going to come in and ask me a question. Yeah. The one thing that we're still conscious or cautious about is the lack of comprehensive reporting that we witnessed yesterday from the MECs. All of the ministers of education provincially were doing yesterday was kumbayaring with the National Department of Education. No minister said to us, look, these are the lessons we've learned from the first tranche of learners coming in. These are the things that we challenged by, and we're still working on making sure that they are bettered as more learners come back into school. And these are the timeframes that we're proposing to people. So we're still looking out for things like the provision of personal protective equipment, the access to water and adequate and safe sanitation facilities, and the ability for learners to physically distance inside classrooms is a major one for us, especially for rural provinces.
Yeah, you talk about the fact that the MECs from the different provinces didn't really give comprehensive reporting in terms of the reality on the ground. Do you think that there are a lot of issues that were missed in terms of that? And is there perhaps something that you can maybe share with us in terms of what the MECs in the different provinces might have then, left out? I do get from a sense from what you're saying that there seems to be a sort of uniform approach when really the circumstances are different from region to region. Maybe you can give us your analysis in terms of what in that kumbaya moment, as you've called it, the MECs failed to really give input on.
Yeah, the first thing that I observed yesterday, and this is just before I share what's been coming in from our membership basis, is that even the MEC of Gauteng was saying to us, look, the Provincial Executive Committee of this province is going to be speaking to the NCC to ask that in order to curb the spread of the virus in the province. But in the same breath, he was saying schools are ready to open, let's go in, we're captured by what the department nationally is sharing with public. So that's a direct contrast. You're painting a rosy picture, but you're also saying that the economy needs to in different places shut down. And what we also know is that there's a dashboard that the Department of Basic Education has created that allows them to track how many sort of positive cases are in a different areas, and that area will then be at a certain alert level, which means that certain grades will be able to go to school during that period. And so we really need the department to stick to that kind of grading to ensure that members of the community know that as soon as their own hotspot or epicenter environment spikes, that certain grades will then be pulled out of school to ensure that everyone's able to self-isolate and stay safe inside of their homes. The things that are coming out from the ground, and you'll see there are plethora of protests taking place across the country, are around the provision of personal protective equipment. Again, the provision of these sort of necessities needed to be in place before schools are set to open. The on-time delivery system by the Department of Basic Education doesn't take the country into its confidence, it doesn't take parents into its confidence, and clearly isn't working, because now parents and teachers and learners are reporting that certain things that needed to be in place aren't. The big issues are still around the access to water and the provision of adequate sanitation facilities. A last thing that I think is critical to mention is that Equal Education, together with two SGBs in Limpopo, were in court last week, Thursday, asking the Departments of Basic Education nationally and provincially to ensure that there are comprehensive and solid plans that are publicly sort of put to the country to ensure that we all know the kind of rollout strategy and plans that the department have to feed the 9 million learners that qualify for the feeding scheme and that have lost out on the ability to access that in the last 100 days. And that's something that we haven't gotten comprehensive activity or efficient or effective activity around inside the school community. So we're still calling on the Departments of Basic Education to ensure that they stop backtracking on promises to feed children and do it forthwithly.
Yeah. One of the other things I'm really quite concerned about, and I wonder if you as Equal Education are just as concerned about this. I know primarily your focus would be on, issues of access to water and sanitation and feeding schemes and so forth. But, the issue of catching up. I mean, of course, this is a tough year for any student at any school, whether it's the best school or not. Are you concerned about the added pressure that is now placed on students, particularly at those schools that are in impoverished areas where, as you say, there's so many other factors that they have to contend with, whether it is the issue of access to water, whether it is food, whether it is sanitation facilities. I mean, this all kind of comes together and becomes quite a messy situation, particularly, let's say, for a student who's in their final matric year, that's perhaps at a school that's already grappling with other issues, then having to deal with the fact that we're in this pandemic and all these other factors. I mean, where do you stand on this particular issue in terms of the year and whether these matriculants will be able to, in fact, progress?
Yeah, so one of our sort of primary demands to the government at the moment is around psychosocial support for the entire school community, teachers and learners, because we're experienced that the exit grade learners, so we work with grade 12 learners that have said to us, look, I want to go back to school because I've got a strong sense of anxiety around my ability to catch up. Yeah. And what is also happening in the schools that we organize in, these are schools in quintile 1, 2, and 3. The kind of move to virtual learning, virtual classrooms, hasn't been happening in those schools or as effective as in others. So there's definitely a strong sense of anxiety around a catch-up program. The one thing that we're trying to dispel from the Departments of Basic Education is this idea of a primary objective to save the school year. When we're inside crisis, which is exacerbating socioeconomic crisis in this country, there's no ways folks can still be looking at running curricula in the same way that it would have despite this virus. And so what we've been calling on and talking to unions about in particular is their sort of insurgence in ensuring that we focus on the bare necessities of what our curriculum needs. We need to focus on our literacy and our numeracy sort of competencies inside that learner sort of base. in the immediate. The one thing that's unfortunate is that equal education has struggled to get contact and sort of robust engagements with subject specialists that are able to advise us what parts of the curriculum are staying and what formative assessments are going to look like for learners during this period. Because school is going to be disrupted. There will be schools that open and close as a result of how many COVID positive cases come up in that environment. And we need to be able to ready society and community for that kind of change. But which then, case in point, is this thing where our learners have said to us, look, Noncedo, you have to ensure that government thinks deeply about how to support us while learning from home. Some have said to us, let's build this campaign around data must fall. Because it's tragic. Learners are having to, inside their families now, debate on whether to get more food or buy data.
All right, Noncedo, a huge pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for the work that you're doing, and I do hope that you do gain the support that you need and that you are looking for, and we hope that some of these issues can indeed be resolved. Thank you very much for giving us your time.